Sometimes we're that small person where somebody comes up with that big idea and we don't see it, so we want to stay in our comfort zone. Or maybe you're that person who's thinking big. You're thinking big and you have this big idea, this big dream. And around you, people want you to play it safe. They don't want you to get hurt. They don't want you to get too far out of bounds. They want you to be there. Sometimes we're on both sides of that fence, aren't we? Sometimes we're the small person, and sometimes we're the person with the dream. Well, here's the thing I want you to know, and what Ken talks about in the book is that our humanity does not evolve except by people who dream big. That is how our entire humanity evolves. So I've been talking from this book called, Anyway, The Paradoxical Commandments by Kent Keith. And I just mentioned, he wrote these commandments when he was a 19-year-old attending Harvard, and he went around after that time, during that time in Harvard and afterward, sharing these paradoxical commandments with a lot of youth groups. He wanted to teach them how to live with meaning, what it meant to live a meaningful life. Okay, that's what it was about, that there was inherent meaning, there was inherent goodness, there was inherent nature of being and feeling and being loved in the activity of doing something, not for something out of it. Here's the way he puts it, since I kind of wondered that. He says it this way: the challenge is to always do what is right and good and true, even if others don't appreciate it. Making the world a better place cannot depend on applause. I knew that if I did what was right and good and true, my actions would have their own intrinsic value. I would always find meaning. I didn't have to have the glory. You're hearing that? Because that's what we look for sometimes. We're looking for that attaboy. We're looking for that, award. We're looking for that thing that says, oh, you made it, you did it, and we want you to take credit for it. But what these paradoxical commandments tell us, and the paradox is it seems like it's not even true. It seems like it's a contradiction. That's what the paradox is. It seems like it doesn't even make any sense. But if you follow it to its conclusion, it definitely is the truth. So here's the paradoxical commandments we've covered before. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. Love them anyway. Because what? Love matters. Love is what matters. I mentioned before that if we try to find someone, anyone, including when we look at ourselves in the mirror, someone who is never illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered, would there anybody left? We wouldn't find anybody but that. We wouldn't find anybody but that. Even ourselves sometimes we fall into those categories, for sure. I do. At least once a week, probably. Renee might keep tabs, maybe it's more often, but we fall in there. So we need to love anyway, because love is what matters. The second one is, if you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Be successful anyway. You will find those naysayers. You will find people be successful anyway. Not success in that we're looking to gather lots of money, but success in the sense that I am here to shine the light that I am. And I read the scripture verses that reference that. What is God going to send us here? What is Holy Spirit going to send us here? What is this ancient vibration of the universe going to put us here for? And then ask us to put a bushel basket over top of our light. That makes no sense at all. What we're here to do is shine what we are, shine who we are, shine how we are. To be successful in that way, to shine what it is, to be who we are created to be. That's what it is. The other two kind of fall together. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. And the good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow, but do good anyway. Because goodness matters. Goodness matters. It does. If you had the card last week, that's what you got. Goodness matters. It makes a difference. And here's the thing about these commandments. They're just not a book somebody wrote. They are true spiritual practices. Because here's what happens. When we love anyway, when we're good anyway, when those things matter, when we're here to shine the light that we are, we have an experience of God. We have an experience of how Spirit works. And we, in that way, allow that Spirit to be known in the world. That's how it works, I think. That's how it works. That's how God is known. That's why I will often say we are an expression of the divine. We are expressing to our highest understanding God itself. God itself. So that's why it's important. That's why important. Who would ever say this stuff doesn't matter? Who would ever say goodness doesn't matter? Who would ever say love doesn't matter? Who would ever say it didn't matter if I was the best I could be, that I did and I operated and I shared the best me I could? Who would ever say that that's not what matters? Of course it does. And it matters because it is the expression of God right here. That's what I would tell you. So the instruction I want to talk about today, I'm talking about these commandments. They're really not commands, as in you got to do them or else something bad's going to happen. They're really instruction. It's like an instruction booklet of how to live the best life, how to live a life that's meaningful. That's what it's about. So the instruction this week is honesty and frankness will make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. Honesty and frankness will make you vulnerable, but be honest and frank anyway. So let's start this. Well, what are honesty and frankness? Let's start right there with that. Well, honesty is truthfulness. Frankness is to be plain and open, all right? But there's a nuance to being frank and open that we must think about, because there's such a thing as biting honesty. That kind of stinging honesty thing. You know what it is. You probably used it before. You've probably been the recipient of it before. And we're not talking about that kind of biting honesty, the kind of honesty that's directed towards someone in a kind of overbearing manner. Have you ever been the recipient of that kind of honesty? No, that's not this honesty and frankness. The honesty and frankness that works in this case is the simple honesty, the honesty that's grounded from the inside out, the honesty that's grounded in a way that says, I want to connect with you in an understanding way. You see the difference? It's the difference between the energy of, well, I'm right, and so you need to listen up because I'm going to tell you how it's done, versus, I was thinking about this and I'm feeling this way about that. You see the difference in the energy of that? It's not in a, I'm right and you need to listen to me kind of way. It's in a, I feel the need to share this with you in this way, in a way to connect with you, because the connection is what's important. It's not just sharing your honesty and frankness. It's with the underlying intention of connection, with the underlying in that way. So what that helps do is create relationships that are respectful. What that helps us do is create and foster compassionate communication. That's what we're after. We're after this connection thing with honesty and frankness. If that's not it, if it's the biting kind, it doesn't quite work that way. That is not going to give meaning to our lives in that way. And if we communicate this way, it will make us vulnerable. Vulnerable is a 10-letter word that some of us think is 4 letters, because we associate vulnerability with weakness. We think if we're vulnerable, all bets are off, everybody's going to trample on me. Well, listen to the dictionary.com definition of that, and maybe this is where we get it. This is what it says: open to moral attack, criticism, temptation, exposed, capable of being physically or emotionally wounded. Well, yeah, we try to protect ourselves from that, don't we? Who would want to be opened up to that? Who would want to be vulnerable in that way? Well, we wouldn't, would we? That's kind of crazy. That definition makes us fearful. But here's the thing. If we don't do anything, if we don't say what's on our mind, if we keep up a facade, if we pretend that we want to stay protected by not sharing what we really believe and feel in a connecting sort of way, it's as if we build a wall up around ourselves. We build a wall up around ourselves and then we think we're okay. We have this false sense of security by being in there because we're afraid to say what's on our mind in a connecting and understanding kind of way. And instead of feeling freedom, we imprison our own selves. That's what we end up doing. Listen, it is much easier to build that wall and stay imprisoned in our own self than it is to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable is to be absolutely, amazingly courageous. It's to put yourself out there, all of you. It's to put yourself out there. It's to not be afraid to be wrong. It's not to be afraid to change your mind. It's to be totally open and free. And that takes a lot of courage. Vulnerability is absolutely not weakness. It's one of the most courageous things you can do. A while back, I read this book. I was drawn in by the title. The title is called Costly Grace. Costly Grace, by a man whose name is Rob Schenck. I don't know, anybody recognize that name? So you don't know anything about him, do you? He was an evangelical minister. Listen to what it says on the front cover. Rob Schenck has been at the intersection of evangelical Christianity and conservative politics for his entire career. He's been attacked by partisans on both sides of the aisle. He has been called a right-wing hate monger, the ultimate DC power broker, a traitor, and a turncoat. In the 1980s, he became an activist leader of the most extreme wing of the anti-abortion movement and entered the political mainstream inside the Beltway's religious right, brazenly mixing ministry with Republican political activism to advance his movement's crusade in the culture wars. So this is where he was. He's the one who was showing up at demonstrations with real blood, with an actual fetus that was aborted, the most crude and crazy kind of right-wing person. And then something happens. After a deep reckoning with the texts, both of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the Bible itself, revisiting the lessons that Jesus imparted and regaining an understanding of the essence of the gospel, he had an epiphany. He realized that he had strayed from his deepest convictions, that all are worthy of love, acceptance, and forgiveness, and should be free to live outside human judgment and exclusions. In this memoir, he reflects on his path to God, his unconscious abandonment of Christian principles in the face of fame and influence, and ultimately his return to the abiding beliefs that guide him in his ministry work today. So think about this. Here's this right-wing Christian evangelical who decides that everything he built his entire career on, all of the power he had in the halls of the great Washington, D.C., was a bunch of bunk. It wasn't really the truth. It didn't work at all. Can you imagine how much courage it took him to be vulnerable to his new understanding of the way things work? I'm sure he experienced some of these other paradoxical commandments. He lost friends. He lost people who were important to his life, who he thought were integral in his life. And now he is a champion for those who have been sidelined by extreme right Christian principles. I mean, my gosh, his honesty and frankness now has cost him basically his career. But you know what? It's opened him up to a brand new way of being, one that he would not go back on for a second. Not for a second. And I'm thinking to myself, for someone with this kind of influence, someone with this kind of chutzpah, someone with this kind of exposure in the world, if he can be honest and frank in his transformation, well, why can't I do that same thing? With only the idea to connect with people, to say I'm sorry, to say I was wrong, to say I changed my mind, to say I see you differently now, to say I used to hate you, I used to bargain against you, and now I want you to know I love you. Wow. That's the power in this paradoxical commandment. To be honest and frank, even though you're vulnerable. To be vulnerable and courageous. Pretty amazing. Yes? Pretty amazing. When you are willing to be vulnerable like that, God works through you. Spirit, whatever your name for it is. It doesn't matter what the name for it is. Shivaya, right? Whatever it is, it allows room for that to work. Because I'm convinced he didn't do that all on his own. In fact, there's nothing we do on our own. It's through the God that lives us. Open that up in him. So it was costly grace for Rob Schenck. And I appreciate this really honest and frank book that he put together to let it out. All right, one other one. that I want to share today, instruction number 6. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. Let me tell you, this thinking big is a big deal. Let me read this from Kent's book. A small person is not a person who has low position or title, or little money or little education. A small person is often a good person, a hard worker, committed to the organization, and a good friend to his or her colleagues. What makes a person a small person is simply that he or she sees life in very small terms. A small person doesn't see very far beyond his or her own life. He doesn't want it to change. She doesn't want to talk about how things might be different, because then things would be different. And that person, a small person, doesn't want things to be different. They often see things in terms of his or her own power or comfort or convenience, and believes that what is best for him is best for the family or organization or community. A small person's life may be no bigger than his immediate wants and needs and fears. So, are you that small person that looks at the big ideas and says, oh man, that could never happen? Why are you trying so hard? What's wrong with you? It's comfortable right here. Sometimes we're that small person where somebody comes up with that big idea and we don't see it, so we want to stay in our comfort zone. Or maybe you're that person who's thinking big. You're thinking big and you have this big idea, this big dream. And around you, people want you to play it safe. They don't want you to get hurt. They don't want you to get too far out of bounds. They want you to be there. Sometimes we're on both sides of that fence, aren't we? Sometimes we're the small person, and sometimes we're the person with the dream. Well, here's the thing I want you to know, and what Kent talks about in the book is that our humanity does not evolve except by people who dream big. That is how our entire humanity evolves. Let me read you a couple examples that he has in here. Just a few. Susan B. Anthony dreamed of the day when women in America would be allowed to vote, and she helped achieve that first step in gender equality. Gandhi dreamed of freedom for India, and he led a peaceful revolution that liberated 100 million people. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of racial equality, a dream that we're still trying to realize today. Florence Nightingale had a vision of modern hospitals served by well-trained nurses. Been to the hospital recently? Yes. Thomas Edison had big ideas that led to the electric light bulb and the phonograph. Jonas Salk dreamed that polio could be stopped. This guy named Aiki Shibuyasa of Japan, he lived in the late 1800s to 1900s. During his lifetime, he founded and developed more than 600 industrial companies. 600 in his lifetime. Ray Kroc, McDonald's, do I need to say more? Debbie Fields was a young mother with no business experience when she dreamed that she could make a success story that sold only cookies. And Frederick Smith had a vision of a new kind of express delivery. You know what he built? FedEx. All these people had dreams of doing that when people right next to them probably said, are you crazy? That'll never work. But they all changed humanity. Well, good or bad, that's a decision, the judgment that we can make. Here's the thing. I think the biggest gift that we can give each other is to say yes to somebody's dream. To get out of the mindset of, well, that couldn't possibly happen. What do you mean? There's been all sorts of crazy stuff that's happened. Look at the internet. Look at Facebook. Look at all the technology. Oh, again, you can judge it good or not. But man, somebody had some dreams. And people with small-mindedness means that we stay, when we are that way, we stay comfortable, too comfortable in the smallness of our world, not wanting to be uncomfortable, not wanting to break out a little bit. So there's the two I have for you to chew on this week. The biggest men and the biggest women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest ideas. Think big anyway, because you know what? Dreams matter. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway, because connection matters. Connection with each other matters. So we're going to take those ideas into the final chant this afternoon that Misty will lead us in. I don't know if it's so much of a chant as so much as listen to these words and take them into your heart and let them live there anyway, just for the heck of it. It might make the biggest difference in your life. Yes, please join us on the cushions if you want to come down, and let's do this meditation together. You ready?
Yeah.
All right.
So I, for some reason, didn't include 2 Sanskrit words on your little chant sheet, so I'm going to tell you what they are right now. Aham, prema. I may have sang those words here once before. And what that means is I am divine love. How powerful is that? So I'm going to sing a song that an amazing woman wrote. Her name is Omkara. She's part of the Muji Sangha. And the words are so powerful. And then we can chant together Aham Prema. Okay? Just take a few deep breaths now. Let Rev Paula's words kind of anchor. And then be vulnerable enough to open some space in your heart to receive this truth. Aham Prema.
Goes nowhere but to itself.
Remember this. You do not have to do anything to be loved. And being who you are does not let others down. Simply be who you are and love what is before you. And if you stumble and fall, stand up, dust off your clothes, and move once again in the direction of love. So take a deep breath in and out. Feel the gratefulness in your heart. Feel the vibration, joy of truth or peace, possibility. Feel grateful in this moment.